Right, yeah, this is a PayPal from Braden. I thought this was going to be an actor, but no. Roy Den Hollander was an American lawyer who gained notoriety as a suspected murderer after acting as an attorney in several unsuccessful sex discrimination suits on behalf of men. He had also worked as a private investigator in Russia. So yeah, that's who he is. But yeah, this is Jim Shreds him. Let's go.
We got Roy Den Hollander.
Oh, good. I want to talk to this guy.
Yeah, Jimmy turned us on to what Roy's all about. Roy, welcome to the Opie and Anthony show, my friend.
Thanks for having a serial anti-feminist on your show. I appreciate it.
Well,
what they're calling you.
You were in the Post or the Daily News yesterday about suing Columbia University for the women's studies programs.
Right.
Now, let me ask you too, because I thought this was interesting. You've sued nightclubs for ladies' night because of they're saying they're charging men more, and you're also you're suing for the Violence Against Women Act. You're calling it unconstitutional for allowing alien females to acquire citizenship by falsely accusing their American husbands of mistreatment. So, what is exactly driving you with this?
I'm sorry.
What is exactly driving you with this?
What's driving me is justice. I'm tired of having my rights violated. I'm tired of seeing this society, which for the last 40 years has been bending over backwards or perhaps forward to give girls preferential treatment at the expense of the rights of men.
Have you gotten anywhere legally with it? Like especially with the one thing. My first instinct was I like the fact that the ladies' nights, because basically men allow that just to get the broads in to get them drunk and fuck them. So it's almost to our advantage to have a ladies' night. But it always kind of annoyed me that they have it. Have you gotten anywhere with that?
No, all the cases are pending. What happens when you bring a case of this nature is the first inning is the opposition, the defendants make motions to dismiss. So in the ladies' nights, the motion for dismissal was made. I filed my papers, and there's been no decision on that.
Okay.
In the Violence Against Women's Act, I am presently putting together my papers to oppose the government's dismissal motion. So there's obviously no decision on that yet. And on this women's studies program, it just started.
Well, Roy,
I'd like to go back to ladies' night.
Okay.
Think of the amount of money that is transferred from the pockets of guys to the pocketbooks of girls over all that time, and then you determine the present value of that. And also in New York City, when I go out to clubs, I generally find probably a 50-50 mix of girls and guys at clubs that charge girls the same. But at ladies' nights, there's usually more guys.
Okay, and let me ask you too about before we get to the Columbia thing, which I think I agree with you on. The Violence Against Women Act. I mean, look, there is obviously. Are you saying that the idea is unconstitutional because it says women in it? Because I almost don't mind this one. Because let's be honest, I mean, common sense dictates that in domestic violence cases, it's almost always a guy hurting a woman. I mean, what is your
Who
contention
mouths off?
Well,
I'm not saying she wasn't lippy.
That's not actually true. That there is just as many of the opposite way round. But also with this guy's point that maybe ladies' nights men pay more, but then there's things like girls' clothes and things cost more money than men's. And it's like what Jordan Peterson says, women are more agreeable than men are. Society has worked out that women will pay more because they're through that more agreeable, whereas a man just won't pay it. So yeah, there's but to go after one, you'd have to go after all of them, and you can just get into double standards both ways on things. But also, that isn't true. It's just that, with the domestic abuse thing, there are a hell of a lot of where it's the opposite way around.
That's really untrue. I mean, there's some studies that were done by the Department of Justice, and there's an organization called Radar, which have a lot of papers on that. And what it comes down to, domestic violence is just about equally between the girl and the guy. However, the girl, in 70% of the time, uses a weapon, as opposed to a guy might use a weapon in 20% of the time.
What does the case say of how many. Let's what kind of statistics do you have on how many women were killed by the violence of a spouse or an ex-spouse, or how many men were killed by the violence of an ex-spouse? I think you can find that it's much more in one direction.
In that, and when you're talking.
But then that depends on what you mean as well. Because, yeah, obviously, physically, a woman... Although there are cases where women beat men and men don't fight back and they get beat by their partner. But, yeah, it's more of a... like with a woman's abuse style, it's going to be more mental because they're physically not as strong. You're not going to typically have... It's like there's more... rapists that are men, like, because it's like kind of physically impossible for a woman to do it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
About, and that's what I was going to get into. When you're talking about the injuries that result, more girls are injured by a guy, husband or boyfriend, accosting them, than vice versa. But I think it's not as much as you may think. I think it may be, say, 60-40. So 60% of the girls are seriously injured, and 40% of the guys are seriously injured. So if you look at some of the studies, you'll see it's different than the common sense impression. But concerning the women,
I think he's also right about that statistic. It is roughly about that. That if you stood on a high street, and out of the next 10 people you picked one, like out of the next 10 people, the chances are that that you're going to have a 60% chance of guessing right if you guess the male of the most violent person walking down the street. But then 40% it is woman, because in the extremes, like what Jimmy said, in the extremes, then it's going to be men. But it's the same with everything. In the middle, there's massive crossover in terms of everything, intelligence, sporting a bit. Like there are women that can beat some men at sports. Like a woman who plays tennis would destroy me in a game of tennis. But obviously, if you put her up against the male equivalent of her, he's going to be one-sided. He's going to be the man. Do you know what I mean?
Studies program. The problem with the program is that it is giving a benefit to females, and it's not giving a similar benefit to guys.
Which is what?
Well, the benefits are, it's not just, the Women's Studies program is not just courses. It's also networking. It's finding jobs. It's finding, support and help in all different areas. Now, that is geared towards females. So think of women's studies as the varsity sport of campus co-eds. And then compare that to what Title IX of the Education Amendments have been doing to varsity sports for men. Title IX says if you have a varsity sport for men, you have to provide the same opportunities for the females. So you have a varsity sport, or actually an educational program, because Title IX also applies to educational programs of women's studies, which primarily benefits females.
Well, I agree. I don't know whether to agree with you or disagree with you in a weird way, because I do agree with you on something like at Columbia, especially, they have like black female study, all these things that are obsessively focusing on a gender or a race or both, and it's perfectly acceptable. However, if you focused it, and I know I'm not saying we need white people study, but if you focused it negatively on a gender or a race, they wouldn't allow it. But because you're focusing it in a way that they deem ideologically acceptable, they allow it.
Well, I've come across that argument, well, what about black studies? And my response to that is quite simply, when was the last time a feminist was lynched? Shot dead on the front stoop of her house or on the balcony of the hotel she was staying in?
Well,
let me just finish.
Okay.
There's no comparison.
Hold on. It's like, I mean, not lynch and not in the same thing, and maybe not fueled by the same kind of hatred. But to say that there haven't been loads of women, like, there's no question that women are more vulnerable in the world than men are. I mean, that in this day and age is sexist to say, but it's a fact. Like, to say that you would the black favoritism's okay because they've been lynched. Well, there's loads of women that have been murdered by men, kidnapped, sold into slavery. It's happening right now, all the time. Like that happens a lot, especially in our country. Loads of women get kidnapped and sold into slavery. Yeah.
Past 400 years, the institutions of this nation have kept their boot heels on the back of the necks of blacks. During that same time, white feminists and the average white girl have received nothing but preferential treatment.
You mean the same race of people that are now ready to step into the presidency? It looks like. Jesus Christ, dude.
Yeah,
No, I'm not buying that argument. I think if you're against this female studies thing, then black programs like that, black studies, it's the same hypocrisy and the same
It's the overreach.
Discrimination as these women's programs. You're giving preferential treatment based on nothing but race.
Yeah.
And why should people that are not getting that benefit have to make up for this 400 years of a boot heel, like you say, being on the neck when we never did anything? You're talking about ancient history.
And don't forget, women were not violently kept down the way, but women, in fairness, their rights were not equal to that of men for hundreds of years. Maybe it wasn't 400 years, and they didn't face the lynching and the violence, but it was 300 years, and they were certainly not given the same rights or the same treatment under the law or the same pay.
You're right. They didn't have a right to be drafted and sent to Vietnam. 52,000 American men died, eight females. They didn't have the right to go in and work in those sweatshops for the robber barons during the 1800s.
No, but they also fought for the rights to...
See, there's a little bit of truth in both of them, but this bloke's going at it as a big cause and a big thing when it's just these things kind of happen throughout society. But yeah, when a society builds up, there's very little... Like, I don't care what any feminists say. If you work on a building site, a female cannot do the same amount, cannot carry the same amount of bricks, cannot... Do you know what I mean? It's like, cannot do it at the same pace as a man can. It's like, I've worked on loads of building sites. You don't see women on building sites. That's not because they're being oppressed and they can't be. It's because they don't want to be. Who wants to work on a building site? But, yeah, still, women were... Well, not... Because you can make an argument that the women's have had a kind of preferential treatment in terms of they haven't done the physical labor because, like, and they don't fight in wars. But it was still a time where women, they basically were second-class citizens. I will give you the fact that, yeah, women don't die in wars and women don't typically do physical labor work. And typically when a society's building like America was back then, it's only physical labor work. It's like they say, you can tell what part of progression a society is at by the drink they consume. If the majority of drink consumed by a country is alcohol, it shows you that they're still in the building process of it. Once it gets into coffee and tea, it's become, the building's done and there's more intellectual things going on. And like I see a historian say that. So yeah, you can argue that the women have been kept safer on one hand, but through keeping them safer on one hand, that they have been kept safe, but it's also, it did make them, second-class citizens, basically.
You're right. They're discriminated against, but was the discrimination beneficial to them or harmful? Was the discrimination based upon prejudice or not? They were discriminated against, but not to the extent that blacks were.
Maybe not, but okay, so what you're saying is that they should allow black studies because they suffered a 9, and women's studies shouldn't be allowed because they suffered a 5.5 or a 6.
Yeah, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, what's your exact
I would
barometer?
draw the line in that, because black studies is not an ideological or belief system. It's history that was previously ignored by America.
It's agenda. It's so agenda driven.
It's very agenda driven. Come on, man. You can't deny that certain types of colleges that have racially oriented courses are not agenda. They call them history revisionists. I mean, sometimes it's right to revise the history, and other times it's just putting a negative slant on what was already said.
Yeah, well, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with a group of people distinguished by the color of their skin coming up with their own history. That's not what I have a problem with. You never hear coming out of black studies lunatic syndromes that the females use to murder the unborn, murder newborn, murder their husbands, murder their boyfriends, murder their children, and get away with it or receive minimal punishment. You never hear that coming from a black studies. Someone saying,
really, like
well,
the fact that William Kunstler,
black, I should get away with this murder.
Really, like the fact that William Kunstler tried to use black race.
OJ. That's not even a big deal, but in our country, OJ. But I know it was a big deal, and everyone knows OJ done it, and everyone knows he got away with it.
As a defense for Colin Ferguson.
William Kunstler was the one.
And he killed a white woman, I think. Might have been a black, I don't know. So, I mean, that's how little I know about that. But he killed a woman and got away with it. Yeah, this bloke's an idiot.
Aberration, which always happens.
Like I say, he's kind of, this guy is the definition of a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing.
And there's black studies programs have been under a lot of scrutiny and gotten a lot of criticism because a lot of their speakers, their guest speakers, some of the professors have come out with just some outlandishly, horribly racist remarks. And like I said before, it's very agenda driven. I'm not saying all of them. I'm sure there are some nice groups that get together and want to talk about history. But you know, to say that it's different than the women's studies and any less or any more
inappropriate or dated.
It's kind of silly.
Your constitutional rights.
What's that?
Actually, it's not appropriate or inappropriate. It's violating your constitution.
However you want to phrase it, whatever semantics you want to use. Okay, fine.
Semantics. That's what the lawsuit's based upon. Well, I disagree with your take on that. I think women's studies programs are fundamentally different, and they.
Okay, so you think it's based on gender bad, based on race good?
No. Well, first of all, I don't use the term race because there is no such thing as race.
Yeah, of course
there is. What you're really talking about is a differentiation in color of skins. There hasn't been another.
No, you don't think. You obviously. Wait a minute. You don't think there are cultural differences between different people of different, like I'll use the word races, that are based on things other than just skin color? Like you don't think that. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
The fundamental distinction that is made is based upon color, but people use the term race, and scientifically and genetically speaking, race is a term that doesn't exist. It's non-existent.
But you understand the common use that the word has when we're discussing it. So to play a game of semantics and go, well, technically, guys, I mean, come on. We all know what we're talking about when we say race. We all know you talk about black people or white people. You understand that.
When you're talking about black and white, you're talking about color, that's fine. But I just want to add in a little quote from George Orwell.
Mm-hmm.
If thought can corrupt speech, speech can corrupt thought. When you start using race, it brings out the connotation that there's a fundamental biological, physical...
No, it doesn't. You don't...
Well,
the fact that...
But also there is. If you test my DNA and test an African's DNA, they're not going to go, oh, you two are exactly the same. They're going to go, he's from Africa and he's from the UK. That says right there that there's a difference. It's like, we're a bit like dogs. Yeah, we're all the same race. Which also might be why, because the only other species that's as varied as humans is dogs. And dogs was literally man-made, which makes you wonder whether the ancient aliens creating man may have been onto something. Because we are the most varied race. But you get what they mean. Same as if you test the African's blood and you test the Chinese person's blood. They're not going to go, to be honest, we tested you, but you've literally come back exactly the same. Wind blew the papers, they got muddled up, and we don't know who's who because you're identical. No, there's genetical differences between us all. like I think aren't Ashkenazi Jews, or however you say Ashkenazi Jews, they make up the 1% of intelligence in the world. A specific group and bloodline make up the smartest people in the world. There's genetic differences.
Put a
Maybe
negative
that's me.
spin on it.
Maybe I'm older than you, and maybe it's because of the time that I grew up in.
Right. I don't know. Would you remember when women couldn't vote or no?
If you want to go back to the women's studies.
Well, we're just getting into an ideological thing, because I was kind of for what you were doing, but now it just seems like it's almost like you're a special interest parody. Like I'm the guy who goes after the women's causes, like the guy in California who was fighting the Pledge of Allegiance. It almost like I'm just listening to your reasoning, and to me it's a complete. It's very sectional, as opposed to like, yeah, this is how I feel. We should all be given the same amount of X, Y, and Z. You have it specifically for women. I should say, I almost said a hard-on for women, but you know what I mean.
No. I know what you mean. I can see your point of view. I respect your point of view. That's not how I see it.
The fact that you would.
I see what I'm trying to do.
Right.
Is to eliminate the constitutional violation of men's rights by feminism.
The fact that you think that domestic violence is fairly close in the people who are doing the beating and being beaten.
I don't say that the Department of Justice.
I don't buy that. I don't buy it.
Then go to the Department of Justice Studies website.
Yeah, I'd like to look at that. The one thing I would believe is that the domestic violence is obviously more against women than men, but I think women will use it, especially in court, and say that they were violated,
I only mean legitimate
assaulted,
cases.
when they actually weren't, in order to get the guy in trouble.
Sure.
Now that I've seen happen, but as far as a 40-60 split of violence against men and women,
I don't buy it.
I don't know. I'll look that up. I know.
No, he's that's what I mean. He's got a kind of some things like that is true. I've heard that statistic that because in the extremes it's always going to be a man, but like in the middle ground it's like loads of crossover, but I've heard that the 60-40 split, and that if you was to if people walking down the high street, if you was to say the man is the aggressive, you pick a man and say he's the most aggressive person, you'd be right 60% of the time. He's right there, but he's gone way off kilter with it. This, like I said, this is the definition of a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing.
The website is for the Department of Justice and the stats and stuff.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's a 50-50 split of domestic violence, the way domestic violence is defined under the Violence Against.
And he actually might be right about that too. I can't remember if it was that. It actually even might be that it is a 50-50 split of that, or. But yeah, it's close. Like it's that's kind of true as well. I'm pretty sure.
Women Act. What I'm saying is serious injuries is probably 60% female, 40% guys. That's what I'm saying. And look it up. If I'm wrong, go on the internet.
We'll take a look.
I'm a jerk and a liar, and I'm.
No, I don't think you're a jerk and a liar. I just think that the fact that what bothers me is that there's such an inconsistency in your view of what is okay to stress. Like, and I agree with you on feminism in one point. I think in the old days, feminists used to be about wrecking roles. Like, hey, blue doesn't have to be for boys, pink doesn't have to be for girls. Girls can do this, boys can do this. I think it was a lot about removing roles and these bullshit little things we get, kind of corners we get painted into. Mm-hmm. And then it turned into men are bad. Right. So I kind of like the fact that you're going after these studies, because I think that the women's studies shit annoys me. But the fact that you have all these excuses as to why racial studies are okay, they're the same excuses used to justify women's studies.
Right.
Well, my belief is that's not so. My belief is that the black studies programs do not wreak the same type of harm to constitutional rights that the feminist program.
And I take it you're pro-choice because you mentioned that, right?
You can criticize my belief system. That's fine, but that's
Why do you?
what I believe, and I believe I have grounds for that.
Why do you hate women?
You can't hate that which you lust after. So it's not.
You can.
Females.
So you lust
You
after women?
absolutely can.
Let me finish this.
Sure.
It's not the females I hate. It's the feminists that I despise.
Mm-hmm.
When I go to a club and I'm trying to find some girl, hit on some girl, if I come across a feminist, I move on. But it's
How do you know she's a feminist?
The target is.
Hairy armpits.
Go ahead.
How do you know she's a feminist?
Well, when she starts, when I use the term girl and she tries to tell me to use the term woman, or sometimes they just call
man.
me a chauvinist pig.
I'm a guy.
Wait.
It's pretty obvious.
But wait a minute. And you also mentioned, like, you mentioned, like, the fact they want to kill the unborn. Like, so you got basically a pro-life stance, and you're annoyed at all these, you got a weird thing with women. This is not just about the Constitution, and I think you're being dishonest with yourself and everybody else if you don't just say exactly what it is. Like the fact that you would walk.
Wait. Did you read the VAWA case?
The what?
Well, I have a website that has a Violence Against Women Act. I have 3 lawsuits, okay?
Mm-hmm.
There's a Ladies' Night lawsuit, there's a lawsuit against the Violence Against Women Act, and there's this lawsuit against Women's Studies. If you read the complaint on the Violence Against Women Act, you will see the tipping point that pushed me into this effort to stop the feminism from violating guys' rights. And that was pretty much the Edgar Allan Poe horror of divorce that I went through about 7 years ago. So that's the tipping point if you're looking for the immediate motivation.
There's the nugget. There it is. He went through a horrendous divorce and now he hates women, basically.
Okay, now I see where his motivation came from.
Ever since
Thank you, Anthony.
many
Divorce.
years ago, because I knew it was just another special interest group trying to get what they don't deserve.
Hey, Roy, it seems like it's a waste of time to go after the clubs and all. Why don't you go after, like, lawyers that are defending women in divorce cases? Because that seems to be way out of whack and way at. There's no balance there whatsoever.
That's a problem.
The guy gets screwed almost every single time in a divorce case. That seems like it would do more good than going after club owners because they have a ladies' night.
Yeah, that's true too.
I mean, you're right about that. I mean, a lot of these lawyers, they'll tell the lady what they should say, basically what the lie. The lawyer sits there and says, well, if you say this, you'll get this. If you say that, you won't get that, and that's what they do.
Well, why don't you
But
just
the
try to
problem is,
change the system?
there's no way I can sue those guys because I have to be, whether I bring the action myself or I bring a class action, I have to be injured. Now, that's an interesting point. May be able to do a class action, but it would be against... that's interesting. Maybe that can be done. A bunch of guys who have been screwed over by their wives' lawyers.
There you go.
And bring actually a mass tort against them.
I like that.
Did your ex punch you in the face?
Let me think about that. That's a good idea. I never thought about that.
Did your ex punch you in the face? Because something's going on here.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
And I'm being serious. Did you have some violence at home? Did your ex-wife punch you or something?
Well, she came at me with a knife twice, but I know martial arts, so that was no problem. No, you see, it wasn't the experience with my ex-wife.
Okay.
It was the experience that I went through when I was in a divorce court. I had a judge laugh at me in the divorce court.
That's weird, and Opie actually made a great point. There is an injustice in that part that it typically way favours the woman. Like, in order for the man to get the kids and that, the woman has to be an absolute mess with no sign of redemption in sight. But why would he go... I think he went out on the pool again, spoke to one woman who put him down because he called her a girl. He just wants everything, he wants to get in ladies' night cheap. It's all the things he wants. But I don't like this about society. I want to go to ladies' nights in clubs and pay the same as women because
my ex-wife is a member of the Russian mafia. She's a Russian mafia prostitute. Okay? Now, she had a couple of her goons threatening me.
Really?
I went to the FBI with the tape recording. The FBI called me and said, well, we found out who the guy was. I said, who is the guy? And they said, we can't tell you. We don't want to violate the guy's privacy. And then the FBI tells me, don't open your door to anybody you don't know, and be careful when you go out in public. The FBI told me this.
So let me ask you.
Sounds like good advice.
It's the treatment that I receive from the courts,
Right.
FBI, police, and immigration and naturalization.
But Roy, they were protecting a guy.
Type of lawsuits.
When that privacy thing was protecting his right, not her.
Yeah, that's right. It was protecting his rights. The guy that's threatening me is protecting his rights.
Can I ask? Can I ask you how you ended up with a Russian prostitute mobster?
Sure. I was working as an acting manager for Kroll Associates in Moscow, and Kroll Associates is pretty much a private detective agency.
Mm-hmm.
And I came home one evening when I first got into town, and there was an apartment party in my building, so I crashed the party, and that's where I met her.
Oh, jeez.
But the problem is, it turned out it wasn't just an apartment party. It was the office of a modeling call girl prostitution ring. I mean, in Russia,
Lucky you moving in right next door. Huh?
Wow, wow, wow.
Wow, wow. Very nice.
Very nice.
You're gonna like this part.
Great success.
When she was a teenager,
Yeah.
she was a mistress to a Chechen warlord.
Really?
Now, how did I find all this out? Because Kroll Associates uses guys in the KGB, well, actually, it's now the FSB and military intelligence to find out information. So after things started going nuts, I asked some guys I knew in Russian military intelligence to check her out, and that's what I find out.
Wow.
So, Roy, is the violence?
Yeah, you could tell Jimmy's getting annoyed. I thought he was going to lose Jimmy when he said, "Think of all the money that goes from men's hands into women's hands," which is like, so what? If you don't want to give, like the OnlyFans thing, if you got a problem with OnlyFans, don't go on there and give girls your money. But why are you bothered that others? Yeah, but I thought he was going to lose Jimmy there. I think Jimmy really wanted to like this guy. That's the vibe I got. But I can feel he's annoying Jimmy. Like, but I have the feeling he actually, because yeah, like I say, I thought he was going to go off on him there because that's Jim Norton's like only hobby outside of doing radio and stand up and that is sleeping with prostitutes. I suppose technically they're men. But yeah, this bloke's an idiot. He's an idiot. Yeah, he's got a couple of facts right, I think. It may not be 100% 50-50. 100% 50-50. But yeah, the domestic abuse cases, like in terms of women to men, are, yeah, it's not as one-sided as people think. Because there's a lot of weak men out there. I mean, it's a weak man that beats a woman, but it's also a weak man that gets beaten up by a woman. I heard saying that back in medieval England, if a man was beating his woman, he'd get put in prison for it, depending on how bad of the injuries it was. And if the woman was beating the man would be put on the back of a donkey and walked around the town, and everyone would throw stuff at him because he's a pussy. He's a pussy man getting beaten up by a woman. Tough days in the old days in medieval England, Britain. But yeah, that's part one. Sweet.